Hi, good evening. Thanks for joining us. San Diego could be on the hook for about $2 million in fines and infrastructure upgrades after inspectors found problems with how the city was enforcing stormwater management rules. Joining us to explain is iNewsSource reporter Leo Castaneda. Leo, first start out by explaining to us how the stormwater system actually works.
Well, the stormwater system starts with drains throughout the city. You know, like the ones you see on sidewalks that say no dumping. Those collect water and take it out into the oceans and bays, separate from the sewage system that takes water from toilets out to treatment plants. Polluted stormwater can harm wildlife, and it can make you sick if you go swimming in the ocean too soon after it rains.
That's right. If stormwater doesn't go to the treatment plant, then what stops trash from actually going into the ocean?
Well, the drains at the beginning of the stormwater system are supposed to have equipment to filter stormwater and runoff to keep trash out. And the city has to make sure developers are designing and installing those filters correctly. However, when the San Diego Regional Water Quality Control Board did an inspection, it found that wasn't happening.
And that's where the fine comes in.
That's right. The city was fined about $1 million, but half of that will be forgiven if the city installs treatment systems in 6 parks that go above and beyond what would otherwise be required. Those upgrades are estimated at $1.5 million. They also have to tell more than 140 private developments they have 60 days to get their stormwater management systems up to code or face $100 a day in fines. For more on this story and for a map of all of the public and private developments that aren't up to code, go to iNewsSource.org.
iNewsSource reporter Leo Castaneda. City Council is urging Mayor Kevin Faulconer to finalize an action plan on climate change. The draft plan outlines steps to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by increasing mass transit use and switching the city to clean local power sources, all by 2035. Now, some environmentalists say Faulconer is hindering the plan, but his office says work is proceeding at the expected pace and final adoption of the plan could happen in the spring. San Diego's a step closer to reforming its rules for recall elections. Some problems were found during last year's effort to remove then-Mayor Bob Filner from office. The current rules allow 39 days for a recall petition, but recall supporters can keep gathering signatures while the first set is verified, and they can get a 30-day extension if they fall short. If the recall qualifies, the vote must be scheduled within 60 to 90 days from the time council calls a special election, unless there's an election coming up within 4 months. Sound a bit confusing? Well, here's the proposed revision. 99 days to circulate a recall petition, no extensions, and a recall election would have to be scheduled between 90 and 180 days. The plan now goes to the full council. A sexual assault reported over the weekend marks the third at San Diego State University since the start of fall classes. In fact, SDSU has averaged 2 sexual assaults every September since 2010. KPBS reporter Angela Carone has been following the assault problem on college campuses. She joins us from the newsroom. Angela, you spent some time on campus today. Are students reacting to news of another sexual assault?
They're concerned. Dwayne, as you said, there hasn't been a spike in the number of reported sexual assaults at SDSU, just a lot more attention paid to them. I spoke with a sophomore who is also a resident assistant in the dorms. Her name is Rachel Beck, and she's particularly worried about walking on campus at night. Here's Rachel.
Just walking to the library at night, I always ask, one of my male friends, come with me. I just want someone with me so that I'm not alone, because you do, when I'm walking, I'm just all right, is there anyone there? And it's definitely that feeling you constantly have to watch your back for whatever reason. So.
And Angela, you also spoke with campus police who actually clarified what kinds of assaults are taking place.
Right. Lieutenant Randy Lawrence said that while students like Rachel should be taking precautions, they should also be aware that sexual assaults by strangers on campus are actually rare. Here's Lieutenant Lawrence.
So we do want them walking in pairs and in well-lit areas. That's obvious. What that also triggers, though, is the fact that you believe that the rapes that occur are strangers. Okay, or somebody is being grabbed or pulled into a car, a bush or something. In reality, the experience here at San Diego State is that's not the case. Usually they're people that either are friends or acquaintances, or maybe they just met at a party one evening.
What did you learn about the assault over the weekend?
Well, we know that the two parties knew each other. They'd been hanging out during the day. Alcohol was involved, but the police don't know how much of it or how much of it was a factor. The young woman went to a local hospital at 6 p.m. on Saturday, where she got an exam from the hospital's sexual assault response team. And the suspect has been identified, but no arrest has been made. So right now, the investigation is ongoing, and authorities are waiting to get the DNA results from the hospital exam.
KPBS reporter Angela Carone. The weather gave firefighters a break over the weekend in Northern California, but they're not expecting it to last for long. Temperatures are rising again, and there's a chance of more strong winds. The King Fire has now burned through 137 square miles, and it's forced thousands of people from their homes. A man suspected of starting the fire is being held on $10 million bail. The federal government's approved a plan to fix part of the Salton Sea's shoreline. The plan is to restore about 700 acres of wetlands along the lake's southeastern shore. The Salton Sea is California's largest lake, but it's been shrinking because of the drought, and the wind is carrying polluted soil into the Coachella Valley. Officials there say the restoration project will help prevent the blowing soils. A lockdown of Sierra Leone over the weekend led to the discovery of 150 new Ebola cases as West Africa works to contain the virus. Amitha Sharma takes a look at the international effort underway and how a local company is involved.
Ebola continues to wreak havoc in West Africa. More than 2,600 people have died out of 5,000 cases in Liberia, Guinea, and Sierra Leone. The UN calls the epidemic an international security risk. Joining me to talk about the deadly virus are Dr. Thomas Novotny, co-director of the Joint Doctoral Program of Global Health at SDSU, and Erica Ullman-Sapphire of Scripps Research Institute. Dr. Novotny, a 3-day lockdown aimed at stopping the spread of the Ebola virus in Sierra Leone ended Sunday evening, and yet there are 150 new cases reported. How effective are lockdowns?
I'm not sure they're very effective in this case because what they really tried to do was to educate at least 1.5 million households as to what the risks were and what the transmission processes were, but also to identify cases that may be in those households that they hadn't been detecting yet. And so in some ways that may be a sign of success that they were able to identify those cases. But the lockdown itself is not going to stop this epidemic. It takes a lot more. And
why has it spread so quickly, and how many more cases are anticipated?
Well, there's been some new estimates that as many as 500,000 cases will be identified before this outbreak is over. And it spreads quickly because it is resulting from city-wide spread in highly concentrated population centers in West Africa and a porous borders and a globalized sort of environment in which the person-to-person transmission can be facilitated.
Erica, as of yet, there are no proven vaccines or treatments. There is this experimental drug called ZMapp. It's been used on 7 people. 5 have survived. And yet, I understand that the dosages that are available are pretty low. Why has production been ramped up?
Yes. So the goal of the basic research effort is to identify what the drug should be and how to make these vaccines. And now with additional funding from BARDA, MapBio has been able to make some more. And that increased production is go on for another 18 months or so. And the vaccines are several. They work very well in animal models. And those are being tested in the healthy humans with the goal of mobilizing them to Africa as well.
What else can be used to treat the virus?
Well, there are small molecules as well that also work in animal models. I think that we need to do a few things. We're early in research days, so not that many doses of any of these things are available that can go into humans now. We are accelerating these as much as is humanly possible. At the moment, contain and control will help. I think the U.S. military deployment is a very good idea. I think supplies need to be there. We can't have doctors dying because they don't have gloves to wear. We don't have enough beds for the patients that need them. The lockdown identified 150 new cases and recovered 92 bodies. You know, all of these were sources that each of these had infected 2 more people. You can see the sense that it's doubling. And so we need to do a parallel effort. We need to do the contain and control, and we need to mobilize the antibody therapies and the vaccines.
Dr. Novotny, the U.S. is sending 3,000 troops to Liberia. If the world community had unlimited resources, what needs to be put on it? I think Erica has outlined some of these resources. What would you do?
Well, the main thing is personnel, health, manpower. These countries their health systems are being decimated. They were in pretty bad shape to begin with, and so we hadn't paid enough attention to developing human resources and health systems resources, and so that needs to be part of this. This is not going to be something as it was in the aftermath of the tsunami, where we go in and a lot of people are taken care of, maybe a few clinics are set up, but not enough is done for long-term strategic development of their health systems.
And Erica, how would you characterize the world's response so far?
I think that it has been slow. Early in the outbreak, the number of cases doubled every 35 days. Now it's doubling about every 21 or 22 days. So it seems to be accelerating. And you can see how there will be 30 people infected, and then the 60, and then 120, and then 240, and accelerates. So my lab has been involved in a collaborative effort in Sierra Leone for years. And when we travel there, we see what seems to work is when the local Sierra Leoneans are involved in the public health outreach effort. We travel with them out to the villages where they speak in their own language in Mende and explain what these viruses are and how they spread. And we've seen people be tremendously receptive to those kinds of educational efforts if they're done in the right way. And so their hope is that can be continued.
Erica, Dr. Novotny, thanks so much for coming on the program.
5 years and $10 million went into planning the expansion of San Diego's downtown convention center, but last month a judge ruled the funding plan was illegal, blocking the project. Now KPBS Metro reporter Taryn Minto says some are wondering if the city even needs it.
On one of the hottest September days in downtown San Diego, buses, taxis, and pedestrians clog the entrance to the San Diego Convention Center. The National Safety Council is in town, and its convention is expected to draw 14,000 people. NSC spokeswoman Kathy Lane said that's why the group chose San Diego.
There's really only a handful of convention centers in the United States that we're even able to go to because we're such a large show.
That's why city leaders have argued the convention center needs to be even bigger, and an expansion was in the works until its funding plan was ruled illegal last month. Now officials are scrambling to keep the expansion alive. Without it, they say San Diego's convention business is at risk. That's what a mayor's task force said 5 years ago. But a new report shows a lack of space isn't the biggest problem. It's the expense of coming to San Diego. The idea of expanding first popped up in 2009, when then-Mayor Jerry Sanders said conventions were outgrowing the existing facility.
The center has reached maximum occupancy, and a lack of available space is the #1 reason clients are not able to bring their business to our city.
The argument was the city suffers millions in lost tax revenues, and city leaders like Council President Todd Gloria are still saying that.
We are currently in a position of turning away a year's worth of business from San Diego. These are conventions and events that want to be here, but we can't accommodate them because our facility is not large enough.
That argument was made in other big cities to justify expensive expansions of their convention centers. But reporters elsewhere, as in Washington, D.C. and Nashville, found that the economic benefits didn't match the hype. Haywood Sanders, no relation to the former mayor, is the go-to critic nationally on convention center expansions. He says he hears Todd Gloria's argument a lot.
They are often portrayed as can't-miss ways to enhance the local economy.
But the University of Texas at San Antonio professor argues in his new book, Convention Center Follies, that the economic impact is often exaggerated. Based on his review, he says some of the country's biggest convention centers, like the one in Orlando, aren't seeing the full economic boost backers promised.
In that market environment, can a modestly sized expansion in San Diego absolutely positively yield an increase in business? And the answer to that is no. May there be a slight increase? Yeah, it's possible, although it doesn't seem terribly likely.
And just more than a week ago, the leader of a local Democratic club echoed the professor's concerns. But San Diego Convention Center spokesman Stephen Johnson disagrees.
There are clients who can't come back because San Diego doesn't offer enough space.
He pointed to letters that support an expansion that were written by the planners of some of San Diego's biggest conventions. But after a judge threw out the expansion's funding mechanism last month, the project is at a standstill, and Johnson said convention planners are growing concerned.
And they're nervous about it because they're booking their event 5 to 7 years out, and they have to make decisions now about their future events.
The City Council today will hear a report about why planners of 57 conventions decided not to hold their events in San Diego on dates from this year through 2026. But just 2 cited a lack of convention center space, according to the report prepared by the San Diego Tourism Authority. In fact, 1 convention group decided to go elsewhere because they wanted a smaller facility. The biggest reason groups declined to bring their conventions here? Cost. San Diego's relatively expensive hotel rooms and high fees charged by the convention center itself were the most common reasons cited. But convention center spokesman Johnson points out 12 conventions were lost because dates were already booked. With more space, Johnson said 2 events could go on at the same time.
San Diego has really become one of the top 5 destinations in the nation for conventions and meetings. The question is do we want to build on that success?
After 5 years and $10 million, convention leaders, city officials, and even the new mayor are betting on it. Taryn Mento, KPBS News.
The number of homeless school children continues to grow across the country. Education Department statistics show 1.3 million homeless children were enrolled in U.S. schools last year. That's an 8% jump from the previous school year. Most of the homeless children were living in doubled-up quarters, meaning multiple families were living together, not by choice. About 70,000 were identified as living in a hotel or motel. Over 300,000 teachers are attending the Science, Technology, Engineering, and Math, or STEM Symposium at the Convention Center here in the city. KPBS education reporter Matt Bowler says while this year's theme is the gender achievement gap, several at the symposium are also talking about an achievement gap drawn along ethnic lines.
Thousands of teachers are trying to figure out how to get girls excited about STEM subjects at this year's STEM Symposium. There are over 300 lectures, workshops, roundtables devoted to science, technology, engineering, and math with an eye towards getting more girls and women into the field. Lupita Cortez Alcala is the Deputy Superintendent of Instruction and Learning for the California Department of Education.
But folks don't realize that there's been a gap, right? And now it's sort of being brought to light because everyone's talking about STEM. Everyone's talking about STEM, right? So now suddenly it's like, how are girls and boys represented in these fields?
But achievement gaps are not only drawn along gender lines. While African American and Latinos make up 2/3 of the U.S. workforce, they only make up 25% of STEM professionals. James Martinez is a lecturer at California State University Channel Islands, and he says cultural differences can be part of the challenge for Latino students and their parents.
It's another cultural aspect of Latinos is that, they have a lot of respect in general. I'm generalizing, but in general, they have a lot of respect for school and they want to be more hands-off. The school takes care of my child in terms of education. We take care of the child when it comes to home things. So.
Martinez says that solutions to inequity, like gender and ethnic achievement gaps in STEM, involve teaching people to challenge the status quo.
There needs to be a message that says, yes, you can question a teacher, you can question a principal, you can question a process, you can question a curriculum.
Organizers hope that students, parents, and educators can be brought together to close the gender and ethnic gaps in the STEM studies. The symposium continues at San Diego Convention Center through tomorrow. Matt Bowler, KPBS News.
Education leaders are also talking this week about how California schools are preparing to implement the next generation science standards in 2016. Amitha Sharma has more.
American students continue to lag behind their peers in science and math. Leaders in education and business are gathered in San Diego this week to talk about how to change that as California schools prepare to implement the next generation science standards in 2016. Joining me to talk about the new standards are Christina Trecha of the San Diego Science Project and Mohammed Chaudhry, who sits on the board of Californians dedicated to Public Education Foundation. Christina, what's the purpose of the new science standards and how will students learn science differently once they're implemented?
Well, anytime there are new standards, there's kind of big 3 pieces. The how do you teach it, we have how do you teach it, and we have what do we know about how people learn, and then the issue of equity. So those are the three main pieces in the next generation science standards. And a huge piece that's different is how we're asking teachers to think about science as a process and a practice instead of this linear, I test my hypothesis, I go to work, I check a box, and I go home and eat dinner, that it's this creative, dynamic process that repeats and that can go through the whole school year instead of just on Thursday for 30 minutes. And an example of this could be these beautiful skulls I have brought. Right now in elementary school, if you are lucky enough to get some science, you might say, I learned about skulls, I read about them in a book, and I know that there are eye sockets, I know that I have a skull. But in my work in the teacher professional development, we want teachers to think differently, as in what are my local resources to think about skulls, what is a skull, and what's an adaptation? I could go to the San Diego Natural History Museum and I can check out these skulls from the Loan Library, and my students can look at this pelican skull. We can then go to the beach and go on a hike. Then we can go back to the museum and look at their skulls exhibit and look at adaptation across the animal kingdom and go talk about the skeleton and start an engineering project by the end of the year that brings in all of what they've learned about structure and function to solve some kind of problem. So it's this more holistic, creative, engaging, challenging to teach standards.
So these standards are going to be implemented in a couple of years. Mohammed, why don't American students perform as well as their counterparts in other countries?
You know, that's a great question, and I think one of the few challenges in terms of as adults we're not doing right. One is we try to go a mile wide and an inch deep in terms of what we want them to know. So if we were to teach all our California standards today in San Diego, it would take 30 years. We only have 12 years in our K-12 education system. So the next generation science standards changes that by going narrower and deeper. Fewer concepts, but understand them much more deeply. The second thing it changes is relevance. You know, the question that students ask, kids ask all the time is, when am I ever going to use this in real life? And connecting the dot in relevance is really important. I'll give you an example. In high school, currently in a biology class, that's a foreign language class. We inundate them with all these terms and memorizing all these Latin terms rather than falling in love with science, turning on the Bunsen burner and digging deep into skulls and other things. So making sure that we provide more relevance and connectivity in a deeper way, I think will change that. And as well as making sure our standards are research-based and we're able to compete with the rest of the world because...
well, I want to talk about that. So you're head of the Silicon Valley Community Foundation. How have you seen the lagging in test scores and the lagging in interest? What evidence have you seen that that's affected America's competitiveness?
So first of all, there's such a severe shortage of talent. Every executive and CEO I talk to in Silicon Valley and beyond, they will hire as many engineers, as many computer scientists as they can find. And bar none, there's such a shortage. It's a shortage of 75,000 engineering jobs where they just can't fill every day. So that's one piece where we know there's a shortage. And now with global companies, they will go where the talent is. So they are setting up shop elsewhere, in India, in China, in other countries where the talent is. So we see it, and we see it every day.
Christina, so women, girls, and minorities tend to not go into science. Why is that?
Well, it's a very complicated question that you're asking that we don't have one very sleek, specific answer to. But a big issue and a big challenge to that is access to engaging experiences that are also pushing you towards asking big questions and thinking outside of the school day too, and experiences, and also the culture of being in those fields. So at UC San Diego, there's a STEM initiative that's campus-wide, and there are people on the campus saying, why isn't my department more diverse? And you know, I'd like to talk to young people and let them know how exciting this work is so that they can know high school, middle school, elementary, you can actually join us in this work everybody's welcome, and the more different viewpoints and experiences you bring in, the better your approaches are to questions and problems. And I think we all know that, working collaboratively as adults, we don't get to pick the group that we work with. So in classrooms of the future, so with these next generation science standards and Common Core, students are going to be working with all sorts of different people, and the more that we can increase diversity in general thinking in any field is going to be great.
We've got to close it there. Yeah. Christina Mohammed, thanks so much for coming on the program.
Thank you.
A San Diego-based Navy ship leaves on its final deployment this week. The USS Gary leaves Wednesday to join anti-drug missions in the waters off Central and South America. The guided missile frigate will be decommissioned when it returns. The Navy is phasing out frigates in favor of faster, newer ships designed to fight in coastal waters. Hope you enjoyed the last official day of summer. Fall will get off to a pleasant start tomorrow. Coastal temperatures mostly in the upper 70s, low 80s with clouds in the morning, then sunshine by afternoon. Upper 80s for the inland valleys with a mix of sun and clouds in the morning. Heading up to the mountains, mostly sunny, temperatures there in the low 80s, and triple digits once again for the desert. You can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org/evening edition. Thanks for joining us. Have a great night.